Ya estamos por aquí otra vez. Buenas de nuevo, chicos. Ahí vamos con el arte del espacio, a ver qué nos cuentan. Voy a intentar traducir lo que pueda, esta vez sí.
So today we're going to talk about how we go about developing the technology and workflows to create the space environments, and we've been working on this for quite a while.
Van a hablar de la tecnología que utilizan para desarrollar el entorno del espacio.
Space in reality it can be pretty boring. That's an actual NASA photo of Earth with not a lot between us and the moon. So that's real and all, but that's not what we want in our game. So.
Son fotografías que están enseñando de la NASA en las que se inspiran para hacer el juego. Dice que está modificado, que realmente no luce así, que es modificado por la NASA, que a través del ojo humano no luce de esa manera.
But nonetheless, we still have this perception. We want something like this. We want something visual to fly around in space. So that's what we wanted to explore as part of this R&D process. So here's some very early prototypes of a type of gas clouds, vaguely similar to that nebula. And our talented art team tried a bunch of different styles.
Impresionante, tío. Como la última peli de Star Wars, tío, cuando se mete ahí en esa nube, tío.
So these were developed in proprietary type of type of volumetric rendering technology called Fume Effects and Houdini, and these are using our gas cloud rendering system, which we've been developing for some time.
Están hablando sobre la tecnología de gas que ha sido desarrollada durante un tiempo que pasado, Dios mío.
But again, they have this type of fundamental problem of scale, where if you look at this, you might imagine that might be 100 miles, 1,000 miles.
Es una pasada esto, tío. Parece real, tío, una foto real.
Scale of a moon or a planet.
Sí.
If you're flying through it, then there's really not going to be anything there. It's going to be like just in the middle of a cloud when you're in a plane. There's just nothing really interesting to explore at the type of conventional spaceship speed. So to demonstrate that, here's a QTing into a gas cloud. This gas cloud
Se van a meter entre una nube de gas para que veáis cómo se comporta y lo que sucede, cómo se vería.
Once you stop, there's nothing really moving other than these nearby asteroids. So again, it's a good backdrop. It's interesting, but it's not giving us that gameplay we quite wanted.
Están diciendo que claro, que cuando te metes ahí que con la nave que no refleja lo que ellos realmente buscan, ¿no?
The first is planetary rings, which is similar to this, which is Saturn's rings. So these are huge, obviously, but however, they're extremely thin in reality. So Saturn's rings are only about 10 meters high on average. At the widest point, it's a couple of kilometers. So that's nice. That's the type of the scale that a spaceship can fly between asteroids.
Están enseñando las fotos de un anillo de un anillo planetario, de los anillos planetarios desde la NASA, ¿no? Y hablando de las dimensiones que tiene el anillo y demás. En este caso.
Effectively 2D, they're relatively simple to author, and they give us a very easy mechanism of getting a good, interesting play space. However, that's not something we're going to focus on for the moment. Sorry, one more thing. Yeah, so this is an artistic type of concept image for the type of thing that we might do for a planetary ring, just to add a little bit more interest. So obviously it looks pretty cool, and you can imagine flying through this in these little.
Vale, está hablando de un concepto artístico que tienen pensando y que nos imaginemos volando a través de ahí, pues es a lo que quieren llegar.
What we wanted to look at is something a bit more volumetric. So one of the problems with this is, although it looks great and it'll be fun to traverse, it's because of it's effectively 2D. You could just fly anywhere straight away. There's nothing that's hidden. There's no type of journey within this. Once you're in the asteroid, once you're outside of it, you can just fly to any point and then just dive in. So it gives us something, but the designers were asking for something more, something where you
O sea, aún están diciendo que a pesar de que tal, la experiencia de meterte ahí, que no, que ellos buscan algo más, buscan un tipo de interacción mayor.
Es complicado,
Están buscando lo que sería una aproximación volumétrica. Es decir, imagino que modifiques el gas.
Al entrar, ¿no?
Sí.
Que se mueva.
Inside, we've got something more like this, some of those like clouds, and we can dodge between things at like conventional speeds. So over about the last 2 or 3 months, we've had the graphics team, VFX team, and art team all coordinating together to make a prototype, which is going to showcase how we want to make future space environments. So I showed you a brief clip at the start.
Bueno, nos van a enseñar un prototipo de cómo ellos pretenden que sea el futuro de los entornos espaciales.
Save the good stuff for the end. So, yeah, building volumetric data turns out to be really hard. But luckily, the film industry has solved this for us pretty much. There's lots of really great software out there that they use in the films.
Está diciendo que construir una historia volumétrica como esta es que lleva muchísimo trabajo, pero que afortunadamente en el cine van bastante por delante y que tienen muchas herramientas que ayudan para la creación de este tipo de historias.
We take that data and we export it into a format called OpenVDB, which is something that was developed by the film industry, by DreamWorks Animations, for films such as Puss in Boots and a bunch of other ones. And now, once we export it into that, that's type of what we take into the engine directly, and then start convert it into our own format, and then we attempt to render that directly, which is something games don't typically take on that type of volumetric data.
Sí, bueno, está hablando de lo de siempre que salen estas, dicen que lo que están incluyendo ahí que normalmente no se ve en un juego.
Yeah, so we, as I mentioned, we generated offline tools, use fluid simulation, layers of noise. But one of the main problems with that is the amount of memory it takes for this volumetric data.
Uno de los problemas que tiene ese tipo de tecnología es la cantidad de memoria que consume.
But it's still quite high. So to try and combat that, we're making modular pieces. So we're going to make say 30-40 kilometer long sections, and we're going to piece them together, which is similar to what the environment team do when they're building a space station or any other outpost or something like that. And we're going to position a few of these together to build longer, more elaborate.
Una de las cosas que están haciendo es hacer piezas modulares de ese tipo de nubes de gas para poder reusarlas o poder hacer otro tipo de historias.
And then to avoid you ever recognizing these things were actually sometimes reused, we're putting a lot of effort into how we light these things and the visual effects. Now, it's surprising how much difference you can really get by just relighting the same area of volumetric data differently.
Dice que es impresionante la cantidad de variaciones que puede conseguir simplemente retocando la luz, reiluminando lo que viene siendo una nube de gas de estas, ¿no?
The memory cost, how quickly it is to author, because obviously the more we can reuse things, the more content we can make.
Está hablando de que hay que tener en cuenta los costes de memoria y aparte de que cuantas más cosas puedan reutilizar, más contenido van a poder crear. Hablando del tema de la modularidad de antes, de la modularidad de las nubes de gas, que lo separan en módulos más pequeños.
Sort of what makes a volume like this different from rendering normal objects and some of the challenges that we had to deal with and overcome, I guess, hopefully. Right, so this volume is a single object. It's about 30 kilometers long, so that's quite a lot bigger than your average object in the game. Also, unlike most of the other objects in the game, you're inside it most of the time.
Dice que esta nube de gas es de 13 kilómetros de largo.
So they're basically volumetric pixels. And as you can see, there's millions of them.
Dice que hay píxeles volumétricos y que como podéis observar que hay millones de ellos, millones de píxeles.
So ignoring the cloud for a minute, we've got 3 asteroids on screen here. And what the engine can usually do for us is we can pass objects to the 3D engine, and it's got some very efficient methods that it can sort of speed things up by reducing what we have to deal with on the rendering side. So if you look at the asteroid on the left, for instance, that's outside the player's view frustum. So we never hear about that for that frame. Also the one on the right, that's occluded by the bigger one. So again, that just never has to be dealt with. And then the big one, we know how far away from the player it is. So at least we can pick a level of detail for it, and we can
Vale, está hablando del nivel de detalle visual que puedes llegar a ver. Entonces, está hablando de que el que tienes enfrente tendrá que tener un nivel de detalle mayor que el que está detrás, que no se ve, y el que está a la izquierda, que tampoco se ve.
Pero para que no haga popping directamente, es complicado, ¿eh? Y consume mucho recurso.
What we told about instead is a huge number of placeholder objects that we've excitingly called chunks. The volumetrics data is just chopped up.
Vale, lo que está diciendo es que en vez de decirle al motor que hay un objeto ahí, para que eso no consuma, lo que hacen es utilizar esta malla que están mostrando, esta malla en 3D, para indicarle que en esa malla pues hay un objeto y está ocupada.
You can see the chunks in the middle in the empty space. We just didn't generate any because there wasn't any gas there, so there's no point processing them. The chunks that are far away from the player, we've actually got a hierarchy of chunks. So the small ones are contained within larger ones, and if they're far away, we just use the large one instead of the small one. So that sort of limits how many of them we have to process. And then when the 3D engine gets to it to cull it, you can see like quite a lot of them aren't needed anymore. So that lets the CPU do a lot of work in advance, and then the GPU can just focus on receiving a list of chunks that have already been vetted and then just drawing them.
Vale, está hablando de del trabajo o sea, sobre la carga de trabajo que tiene que sufrir la GPU. Entonces, solo lo que se ve desde ese ángulo sería el trabajo que tiene que hacer actualmente la GPU, pues relajándose del resto de cosas que no están marcadas ahí dentro de esa zona, ¿no? De ese ángulo de visión.
Ray Marching, ¿qué coño es eso?
Wherever it exits, or in the second chunk it would just start at an entry point and go to an exit point. We'd just chop that up into a bunch of steps, and then we just process each step in turn, and we find out how much color's in one place, we mask it out by however much opacity has already been accumulated on the previous steps, and we just sort of build up a final image. So if we work through all of these with the artist's data that we've been given, we get this screenshot. So the artist data doesn't actually contain any lights, so everything is in fact the same color. So moving on, let's talk about lights. What have I got? Oh yeah. So just focusing on this one point that we're dealing with for a moment.
Bueno, no lo he entendido muy bien, pero creo que del todo que cuando esa línea lo que traza es el patrón por el que la nave se supone que irá según esté enfocada. Y a partir de ahí es donde siguen el...
So that's easy enough to do. We know how far away it is. We can make it fall off. Then finally, there's a phase function that just tells us if that light reaches the gas, how much of it actually comes towards the camera. And that's a fairly simple function. It just says if a light ray hits something, then a lot of it tends to go through in the direction.
Vale, lo que están definiendo ahora, y perdón que corte así, pero lo que están definiendo es importante, dicen que cuando hay ese punto, ellos marcan ese punto en la línea de visión, digamos, y a partir de ese punto, ellos deciden qué cantidad de luz incide sobre tu pantalla. Es decir, ellos transmiten la luz y qué cantidad de luz te llega. A partir de esos puntos es como consiguen modificar la cantidad de luz que te llega a través del gas, que es lo que estamos viendo aquí, ¿verdad? Es una flipada, tío. Es una flipada de la hostia.
Yeah, so we've got all that work that we have to do for a point. And then if you multiply that by hundreds of samples and multiple lights per frame, what you end up with is very, very low frame rate. And what's annoying about that is that 2 pixels next to each other, 2 pixels next to each other are basically getting the same result. So it's kind of pointless to be doing all that extra work. So the way we deal with that is we just break that into 2 separate calculations. At the start of the frame, we know how many chunks there are, and we've got distances and all that kind of useful knowledge. So we can estimate how much detail it's going to need in the lighting, and it just has to kind of calculate at some resolution, usually a resolution lower than the actual gas cloud density, how much light it needs in each chunk. So we just do that work once.
Vale, está diciendo que en el caso en que... Traduciendo un poco, intentando englomerar todo. Está diciendo que si tiene 2 píxeles que están muy pegados, que como que sería perder un poco de trabajo a la hora de recodificar cómo sería la luz en esos 2 píxeles porque están súper pegados. Entonces lo que hacen es una especie de calcular primero uno y primero otro, y dependiendo del cual esté delante o cuál esté detrás, tendrá más o menos de nivel de detalle, más o menos resolución. O sea, imagino que será cantidad de píxeles de ese punto en concreto de la nave de gas. Si uno está detrás, tendrá menos. Si uno está delante, tendrá más detalle.
So the problem with standard shadows that you use in a game is they usually store just a single depth value for an opaque object. That's usually enough. Anything in front of that depth must be out of shadow. Anything behind it's in shadow. And the problem we've got with this is obviously you could be in 50% shadow, you could be in 80% shadow or whatever. So we need something that we can calculate when the light's created that just tells us how much. You can immediately just ask it for any point, how much shadow is there at this point.
Bueno, básicamente, chavales, os voy a resumir lo que están diciendo, porque lo que están diciendo es que necesitan algo que les indique qué cantidad de luz se necesita, cómo se comporta esa superficie con esa luz. A mí todo esto me suena a RTX.
Ya ves.
A mí todo esto...
Al final, maletines de envidia por detrás, tío.
Quizás hagan su propio diseño de tecnología de ray tracing, pero lo que están intentando hacer es una especie de ray tracing con cálculos súper complejos, ojo. Ojo que no están diciendo que sea la tecnología RTX de Nvidia, cuidado.
And what's nice about doing clouds is that if you look at, this is just a graph of how much density there is along that blue line. It's quite a low frequency kind of undulating shape. And so thinking about frequencies is actually a really good answer. So we switched to a technique that's called Fourier shadows. So this is going to be incomprehensible, this diagram probably.
Vale, es que es una cantidad de cosas que... Vamos a ver, lo que están diciendo es que están hablando un poco sobre el tema de la tecnología usada para dar formas a una nube, que es algo complicado. Y para dar esa forma a la nube, lo que utilizan es esta herramienta que están enseñando ahora. O sea, no es la forma, sino las sombras que tiene y demás cosas, que es lo que están ahí. Los Fourier Shadows, qué cantidad de sombras tiene, qué cantidad de...
Now, we actually did stop at 7 weights because just in terms of the amount of memory and the amount of processing that we're trying to trade off, we found that was actually enough to get us from this view to this view.
Bueno, pues eso es el resultado, ¿no? Del trabajo de sombras y demás con esa herramienta.
Right, so yeah, that actually now runs fast enough. We are still optimizing it a little, but it does run fast enough that you can now have a lightning strike that just pops up on that frame. You know, we have to spend like a millisecond or something. I don't know how long it takes, but yeah, you can create them on the fly so long as you don't create like 50 of them in the same frame. The downside is it's still not quite the screenshot we started with. It's kind of monochrome. I think that's only 2 lights, but yeah, they're the same color, so it's kind of monochrome.
Vale, está diciendo que la imagen que tiene ahora, que es monocromo,
a whole load more processing, a whole load more data, but we wanted to sort of enrich it and give you more of a sort of 3D sense of the scene. So a really inexpensive thing to do is you just take this, you multiply all of those values by just completely artist-controlled sliders. So you can then just apply these.
Vale, para dar la sensación de volumen lo que hace es multiplicar esos valores añadiendo distintas capas, por así decirlo. Entonces, para conseguir esa sensación volumétrica, esa sensación de volumen, de profundidad. What the fuck?
Yeah, so this is still not as good as that trailer that we showed you. But the thing is, this is actually as much as I can helpfully do. So I'm just going to hand the baton over to the VFX team with Mike and Michal, and they can carry us the rest of the way.
Hostia, es increíble cómo ha quedado el efecto, ¿eh?
Sí.
Okay.
Que esto es lo de siempre. O sea, una cosa es verlo a través de un streaming y otra cosa jugarlo, ¿eh? Jugarlo tiene que ser impresionante.
Desde luego.
But inevitably, after showing it to art and design, and Ali alluded to this earlier, there are several issues that we're still going to need to solve.
Están hablando de los problemas que tienen con el desarrollo de este tipo de tecnología. Bueno, dice que las nubes de gas están lejos de ser divertidas porque en general se sienten vacías.
So typically, in a more standard environment, this is the kind of thing that we'd be able to solve with VFX. So in this slide, I'm showing basically an empty scene. It's just a block out. There's nothing really in there.
Claro, lo que está hablando es que para llenar para llenar ese espacio que queda vacío, esa sensación de vacío, de nada en las nubes, lo que utilizarán pues será este tipo de efectos, digamos, efectos especiales para dar la sensación de que no estás por un espacio vacío, que no es una monotonía, que hay cosas, ¿no?
Vaya flipe de efecto, ¿eh?
Eso te lo hago yo con el Camtasia, Motoko.
Mira, hasta se las ha colgado, tío.
And to explain a little bit about how we do that for something that's not quite as conventional, Mihal's going to come and show us some stuff.
Sí, están guapos, sí.
Joder.
Sí, están guapos, Mr. Motoko.
VFX.
Hello. Okay, so we've seen that level, and now comes time to actually add some VFX to the gas cloud. But conceptually, gas cloud is kind of like a level, but doesn't have any walls, doesn't have any ceiling, and there is also no concept of up and down. So it's kind of mind-boggling how you kind of organize the space. It doesn't have any geometries to start with.
Está hablando que las nubes de gas tienen el problema de que pues no siguen unos patrones geométricos, no tienen un arriba y un abajo, entonces que es un poco lioso, ¿no? El tema de cómo desarrollar una nube de gas.
So let's take a look at the design feedback that we've been given. It's too easy to lose your sense of direction, speed, and distance. Ideally, what we could do is introduce like a flow of air that moves through the gas cloud. And we would have some particles moving through that flow of air. So if you stop, you look around.
Vale, está hablando de que una de las soluciones para no tener la sensación de que no te estás moviendo, de perder el sentido de que estás moviéndote rápido, es incluir partículas que den la sensación de movimiento, de velocidad, y que si te paras, pues las partículas dejen de moverse. Como partículas que vienen hacia ti, ¿no?
Sí, eso ya lleva tiempo metido, ¿eh? Ahora hay más partículas en la 3.3.
En Hearthstone hemos visto partículas también en el gameplay.
So they wanted some areas which are kind of calm, others should be more dangerous, so you kind of, want to escape from these areas faster. So how we go about doing that? Let's take a look at the first problem first. The new GPU particle system, if anyone been to the second stage before, I mentioned that it allows us to use so-called vector fields. Essentially, vector fields are snapshots of wind. So a vector field is a texture, a 3D texture, and each pixel of that texture is a vector in a specific direction. Then, if a particle flows through the vector field, we can sample that vector and push the particle.
Vale, está hablando de que cada píxel tiene incorporado un vector y que digamos que pueden hacer una especie de corriente de vectores que fluya en una dirección determinada, para resumir un poco.
We can turn all the gas cloud into a mesh, use the Houdini's built-in particle system, flow all of them through the tunnel, then we can save all that data and use in the engine to actually achieve that sense of motion.
Vale, lo que dice es que aplicándole varias técnicas a esas partículas pueden implementarlas en el juego para dar esa sensación de movimiento.
So, for that, we figured we need lightning and so-called electromagnetic interference. Oops. PowerPoint is not that easy. Okay, So here we have the electromagnetic interference.
Hablando de las interferencias electromagnéticas.
Hostia, cómo mola esto,
And the way it's made, it allows us to do that kind of distortion on any type of screen in the game.
Hostia.
De la forma en la que está hecha dice que les permite hacer cualquier tipo de distorsión en cualquier pantalla del juego.
Qué flipada, ¿eh?
Espectáculo.
Seguro que le das un par de toques a tu monitor pensando que es el monitor, ¿eh?
No, pero igual el personaje en una Drake se le da unos tortazos, para que se arregle.
Same effect applied to mobiglass without much effort, really. Again, the way that the effect was made. But the problem is with this effect that the first version of it was driven by the density of gas cloud. So you get more dense areas and less dense areas. And basically, we wanted to make denser areas more dangerous. So what we did is that we are sampling density of the gas cloud at player's location. The problem with that was showing you that you are in the danger area, and that's not quite useful.
Están hablando de que el tema de las interferencias será producido o provocado por la densidad de la nube, pero que el problema que tiene es que debido a las interferencias que hay, te enseñará que estás en una zona peligrosa y que parece que eso no es eficiente para lo que quieren hacer.
Ideally, what we would do is we would sample density of the gas cloud from all around you. Then we would kind of figure out if you're close enough to dense area, and then we kind of send that value to the shader and do the interference.
Vale, está hablando de que
sign distance fields.
Está hablando de que si tú estás en un túnel y ese túnel está todo rodeado de partículas de densidad, te mostrará ese peligro, pero realmente tú estás en una zona segura porque estás por el medio. Entonces, están hablando de cómo resolver, de alguna manera, el hecho de que si tú estás en una zona segura, no tengas esa intensidad de interferencias a pesar de estar rodeado porque estás en una zona segura.
How we do distance in something that's a volume. So in Houdini, we can take the gas cloud data again. We can kind of mark these dense areas. So let's just say density is 0.9 and higher. We turn these areas into a mesh. Then we made a tool that is turning a mesh into the sign distance field. So it's kind of iterating through each pixel of that volume, and it's kind of asking, oh, how far I am from the mesh that we've made. Then all that is stored into a texture, and we can reuse it in the engine and drive that interference that you've seen.
Ahora dicen que ese tipo de tecnología la podrán reutilizar en el motor poniéndolo en cualquier lado para reusarla, para utilizarla.
Kind of dynamic types of effects. There was also a need for art and design to be able to control and trigger set piece events. So we still needed controlled, story-driven events. For example, you're flying through the gas cloud. Suddenly there's lightning striking down a rock. So for that, we again used Houdini. Here we can see how a rock destruction is being made. So first we take the rock asset. We are defining areas in which rock will be split into pieces. Then we can use physics forces to animate that destruction. If we are happy with the result, then it's just a matter of UV mapping. And Houdini is really good at it, because we can quickly and easily UV unwrap like 50 pieces or so that we have in here. Then we can just export all of that.
Está diciendo que si alguien viene y choca contra la roca, ¿cómo harían para destruirla? Que utilizarán otra vez la tecnología esta de Houdini, que es la herramienta esa que tienen, para decidir las piezas que tiene, como el caso de los rayos y demás. Ostra puta, tío.
Yo.
I'm back again. Okay, so I'm going to talk about lightning, which is one of my favorite subjects. So yeah, lightning, it's a key visual requirement of gas clouds, both for art and design. I've gone backwards. So yeah, basically, previously we were able to create really nice lightning effects, but we didn't really have a lot of control over them. We could basically place them. That was pretty much it.
Vale, decían que antes podían hacer efectos de rayos, pero no tenían demasiado control sobre ellos, simplemente podían colocarlos y ya estaba.
We developed several new options to allow us to do so, including the ability to have lightning automatically position itself along the cloud surface. So that's using the sign distance field, which Mihao talked about just then. But we also brought in a new setting called conductivity applied to, so all surface types can have now.
Vale, están hablando de... Aparte que se está cortando una barbaridad, están hablando de que han introducido una nueva herramienta que se llama, una nueva parte que se llama conductividad, que lo que hace es que cada superficie tenga un tipo de conductividad diferente. Y se está cortando un montón el directo original de ellos, chicos, no puedo hacer otra cosa. ¿A vosotros también se os corta, Motoko?
Sí, confirmo.
So the cost, as I say, previously, even though we could do really nice looking lightning, it was really, really expensive. And that's really a problem for something such as the gas cloud, where we want everything else to be as cheap as possible. So with the previous system, if we were going to draw something like this, we're going to be using a lot of control points. Now, the thing about control points is they're very expensive. So you'd probably, wherever this thing is going, it's basically been driven by the control points. So to kind of create that very detailed shape, you're looking at a lot of control points. But right down.
Vale, está enseñando los puntos de control para poder manejar el rayo a placer.
Of the bolt, and we actually used GPU. What that allowed to do was use a much smaller amount of control points. So this is a fairly crude screenshot. Apologies for that, but you can see the red dots are basically the control points, and we're going to use the GPU particles to actually draw that kind of detail in between them. Yeah, we're basically joining the dots. So to do that, as I say, using GPU particles, we actually created a new type of particle emitter, which is a spline-guided one. So this is an example of spline-guided particle emitter. You can see on the bottom I've got
Ahí tienes un ejemplo de lo que sería el rayo guiado.
I'm just going to loop, so bear with me. But yeah, rather than just have a single beam from 2 points, we wanted it to be a bit more interesting visually. So we got some various noise options. We're using simplex noise in this example, but we also had value noise as well. The way I think of it is it basically makes a straight line wibbly wobbly.
Ahí tenéis las diferentes variantes, sería soufflé y simple.
Yeah, and we've also got shuffle noise on pulse, which allows
que provocaría diferentes efectos o diferentes comportamientos en el rayo.
Random timer that we can add via the particle system, and then we've got a second octave, which just allows an extra level of detail, which is obviously really important for something like lightning in the gas cloud, where we need it to look really, really nice from far away, and we also need it to look super detailed when we get up close to it as well. So another cool thing about actually doing this on the GPU particle system is it's so easy to dynamically edit the settings. This is just an example of me playing around with a few attributes in the particle effect itself to really quickly and easily change the appearance of the light.
Está mostrándoos un ejemplo de cómo él es capaz de jugar con los rayos y la creación de rayos y demás, y la dirección que llevan, etc. Con ese tema que habíamos comentado de la conductividad.
You can do lots of cool things with it, basically. You know, you're just limited by your imagination. As well as lightning, we also enable contrails and turbulence inside the gas cloud. These are the same effects that you'll have seen already when we brought in the dynamic.
Dice que aparte de los rayos también habrá turbulencias dentro de las nubes de gas.
They're being controlled by the density of the gas cloud now. And I think personally it's a really useful thing for multiplayer, so you can see where your co-pilots are your other players are going, useful for seeing where the enemy are and things like that. So yeah, I think Ali's going to now do a recap of everything that we've got so far.
So yeah, bringing it all together, we've talked about the volumetric data set we're generating in offline tools you normally use for films, and how we crunch that down into the smallest possible amount of data for the engine.
Real-time ray traced lighting.
Ray tracing and the real-time lighting.
Yeah,
and the 2D shadow approach.
¿Qué pasa?
No, pero eso no es el ray tracing, eso es otra cosa. Lo que dice es trazada de los rayos en tiempo real. Se refiere a los rayos, ¿vale? No a la tecnología de RTX.
Qué bien van a gestionar las Nvidia, esos rayitos.
No, la trazada de los rayos se realiza debido a los puntos estos que tiene como una conductividad especial. Y aquí nos van a enseñar el resultado final, Dios mío.
Espectáculo, tío. Mira, 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 mira.
Qué flipe, tío.
Yo estoy acojonado. Y en la presentación presentan 4 mierdas en vez de algo así, tío. Yo flipo, tío. La presentación digo...
Madre mía, tío. Meterte por ahí, ¿eh?
Ya ves, tío. Oh, mola, tío. Hostia, mira, 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 reventándose las rocas.
Flipa, tío.
Madre mía.
Flipa,
Yo
chaval.
estoy acojonado, tío. Pero no... Dios, pero ¿qué es esto?
Y ahí es cuando aparece una Kraken rompiéndolo todo.
Qué crack, una driller, tío. Me cago en la puta.
Imaginaros, chavales,
¿Ves? Es que esto es acojonante.
chicos, imaginaros una Orión minando, por favor. O sea, una Orión ahí metida, otro puto rollo. El ver eso, el ver un Orión ahí, tiene que ser una flipada.
Like I said, that was in-game. We recorded it last week for you. There's a bit more to do on it, so I'll go through what we need to finish off and what else we want to add to this. So everything we talked about today, like I said, it's in engine, but we just need to polish a few things. So it's not quite ready for showtime, but it's pretty close. The memory and performance is one of the main things. That was running live, recorded live, but we need to do a bit more work to get the performance down for the lower spec machines to make sure everyone can enjoy this. We need a few more shadow things to be done, so the opaque objects, the asteroids there, weren't receiving shadows from the gas cloud. It type of makes them look a bit stuck on, so that's something we're in the process of doing. It should be done soon. A lot of the VFX was placed manually in that scene, but now that we've got this SDF tech in, we're hoping to...
Dice que muchos de los efectos visuales que se han visto en esa escena han sido puestos manualmente, pero bueno, que en el futuro no será así.
Now we can write a tool to help us make it very quickly, so the designers don't have to spend quite so long coming back to the art team to build these things. A few changes to the workflow as well. It's all very new. You know, nobody's made stuff like this before in our company, so we're going to have to just spend a little bit of time figuring out how to do this quicker so we can churn them out a bit faster. And then the procedurally generated volumes is something we also want to explore. So I mentioned planetary rings at the start of the presentation. That's something we definitely want to do. That will need to be procedural because of the scale of them. There's no possible way you could build that.
Está hablando de que necesitan que este tipo de entornos sean procedurales, pues debido a la escala del juego no sería posible hacerlo de otra manera. Así que todo será procedural en el futuro. Veremos auténticas locuras que ni ellos conocerán.
¿Cómo se la han sacado en un momento, tío?
Madre mía.
Bueno, chicos, toca la última parte de la mandanga. Voy a ya compartir el enlace del siguiente directo.
Último round ya.
Ahora es el road to release.
A ver.
No, I mean 10 hours in a CitizenCon, 8 hours and 43 minutes around.
So that is it. We have just a couple short minutes before Chris Roberts takes the stage and takes us on our road to release. Before we get to that, we do have one final check in one final area of the Long Center that we haven't checked in on. I guess he's live.
Let's pass over.
Not representing org, but something totally different.
Yeah. Yes, I'm running a community event called the Daymar Rally.
Ahí os pego el enlace, chicos. Ahí tenéis el siguiente vídeo y el último. Esperemos.
Vamos para allá.
No ha salido todavía, Reque. A ver si ahora sale. Vámonos para el siguiente.
Our rule books here as well, so you can download a copy of that from our website and read all the rules.